Good morning. This is Dan Anderson with the Glen Ellyn Historical Society. We're doing a little walking tour of Lake Ellyn, talking about the history of Lake Ellyn and the role it has played in our community. Actually, a lot of people in Glen Ellyn, because the lake has been such a fixture of the community, sort of assume it's always been here, and the community grew up around it, but that's not the case. The original inhabitants really were the Potawatomi Indians, and when they were here, this area was a marsh, and there was no lake here. So how did we get our beautiful Lake Ellyn and the park around it? Well, in the late 1880s, Thomas E. Hill and his wife Ellen moved into the community. He was a developer, among other things, and he and some partners decided that this would be an even more desirable place if it had a lake. So they were aware of the fact that there were a couple of streams that fed this marsh and a spring that also fed it. So they gathered some funds and they built a dam and created what is now Lake Ellyn. Originally he called it Lake Glen Ellyn, partly because of the topography we have here, the beautiful glen, the hills and valleys, and partly because his wife's name was Ellen, and he used the Welsh spelling of her name with a Y. Well, the lake was immensely popular, and it started drawing a lot of more people from Chicago to visit and all that. And his original plan was to sell the property around the lake at a handsome profit, I assume. That rather never developed. In 1891, he commenced construction, he and his partners, of a hotel over the lake, that direction, and it opened in 1892. Just 100-room hotel, big, beautiful hotel, just before the Great Recession of 1893, the financial panic of 1893, which essentially wiped out the hotel as a viable business. It functioned only about 2 or 3 years as a hotel, and then became a number of other things. But there's more to the history of this lake, and we really should walk around it a little bit to show you some of these things. Lake Ellyn, understandably, has been the focal point of a lot of things that we want to celebrate in Glen Ellyn, and one of them is where I'm standing now, the Veterans Memorial. This was added in 1994, recognizing the role that the many young people, young men typically, but some young women from Glen Ellyn played in the major wars that we have fought. One of the interesting things about this particular memorial place is the cannons. Those cannons, there are 2 of them here, were originally up on Crescent. One of the Churchill sons built a little war memorial up there, and they were moved here for this one. And the interesting thing about these cannons, because his interest was in celebrating the Civil War, where we were very active in the Civil War. Sent 71 of our young people off to fight in the Civil War. But these cannons were naval cannons. They were the only ones he could get when he put his monument together. So what we have here are interesting looking military pieces, but really not at all appropriate for the Civil War or most of what we're celebrating. But they're a nice adornment for this memorial. So, moving right along. Well, we're now at the southwest corner of the lake, Lake Ellyn Park. And one of the things I wanted to mention was that before the lake was built, this was one of the few areas, although much of it was marshy, there was a fairly flat area, and it was found to be suitable as a baseball field. Now that's significant because before the lake was built, baseball was a very new sport in America. And Lawrence C. Cooper, one of our early historians here, among other things, he was interested in baseball. He had learned to play baseball at the University of Michigan. And he came back and he said, you know, this town, then Prospect Park, needs a baseball team. Well, most people in town had never heard of baseball, let alone played it. But he put a team together, and he lined up a game with a Chicago-based team, the Excelsiors. They went on eventually, through several iterations, to be the Chicago Cubs. Well, they'd actually played baseball before, whereas Cooper and his cronies, most of them had not played before. So it was kind of a lopsided game. In fact, that game ended up with a score of 102-2. But I'm told everybody had a good time with the game. Another feature of this particular corner of the lake, this road here, Hawthorne, which was then just a dirt road, In the wintertime, it was used as one of Glen Ellyn's toboggan slides. They closed the road off. Well, not a big deal because this was the early 1900s, 1900 to 1910 along in there. And there were only 4 cars in town, so closing the road made no difference to them. They were probably all garaged for the winter anyway. But people would come down this hill and they'd slide all the way off and they'd hit the edge of the lake and sail out onto the ice. And those that forgot to close their mouth and keep their tongue inside usually got their tongue bit pretty good when they hit the ice. Okay, we're going to move along. Okay, we're standing in front of what was once Honeysuckle Hill, now Glenbard West, of course. Originally, the lake came all the way up to about where I'm standing. In fact, even today, if we get a really, really heavy rain, the lake will overflow its banks and try to reclaim this territory. I've seen it come up here, but in any case, this was called Honeysuckle Hill before there was a high school on it. This was just a wonderful place for kids to play, and all kinds of activities went on with this piece of geography, including building caves or digging caves into it. And the kids, there's one story at least, of kids stealing stuff from stores in downtown and hiding them in the caves that they dug here in Honeysuckle Hill. They didn't get away with it, but in any case, they had a good time trying. Another story about Honeysuckle Hill, in this particular spot where I'm standing, before the high school was built, in about, I guess, the 1910 roughly era, there was a silent film filmed here. And it was based on the Black Hawk War, which of course was roughly a century earlier, 1833, thereabouts. And anyway, during that shooting of that silent film, at one point they had a wagon pulled by horses and being chased by Native Americans right through where we're standing now and up the hill. And I guess it was considered a very exciting part of that movie.
Want to learn more about this and hundreds of other fun and interesting stories from Glen Ellyn's past? Drop by Stacy's Corner Store, located in the Glen Ellyn History Center at 800 North Main Street. Stacy's Corner Store carries a complete selection of books about Glen Ellyn's history. Add them to your library today.